Several of you last week approached me and said that I bombed by not using the Seinfeld clip. I've never seen this clip before, and a couple of you at least brought it to my attention. We're talking about Serenity in here last week and this week, and in my opinion, what's so amusing about the clip is that screaming Serenity now seems kind of self-defeating, right? Serenity doesn't come by yelling, Serenity right now! Serenity, as we talked about last week, is something you cultivate over time, and silence is probably a part of that. So screaming is antithetical to the idea of planting serenity in your life. And I want to continue that conversation today. I want to rehash a little bit about what we talked about last week, about the power of serenity and how serenity comes with confidence, and it comes with the ability to persuade people. People who are serene tend to have more conversational power than people who are just fly off the handle. And so being serene in your conversation, being calm in the way you talk to people actually is more persuasive than yelling at people or getting angry. And we talked about the method. We specifically mentioned parenting and the challenges that parenting comes with, and how a lot of times you just want to blow your stack. And we talked about the calm the heck down method, and that the calm the heck down method is, number one is to calm the heck down, and number two is there is no number two. It's just this idea that if your car wrecks, if you get passed over for a promotion at work, if things just aren't going as they seem, calming down is a good place to start. Is just take a few breaths and realize first world problems, move on with life, and that there are some things that are just flat out of your control. And we mentioned how serenity comes with practice. Serenity is not something so in the clip, what's so amusing about it is you've got this guy who is obviously in some kind of deep emotional turmoil and kind of butting heads with his wife consistently. And so his life is in some sense chaotic. And you can't expect by desiring serenity right now in the midst of a chaotic life that you're going to have it. That foundation for serenity is built over a lifetime. And so we talked about how to practice serenity, that there are 1,000 ways to do that. It's just how to calm down and how to be serene. And we mentioned pillow talk in this passage in Proverbs that says, a soft answer turns away wrath. But then when you get loud and you get angry, that it has the opposite effect. And so even calm speech is such an important part of developing serenity in your life. We talked about sniff it up, taking time to actually literally and figuratively stop and sniff the flowers, that we need to be people who notice what's beautiful around us, take time to go for a walk, take time to enjoy the sunrise. We talked about music and the power of music and how music is a gift from God given to us. And sometimes serenity is built through music. Just putting the headphones on and getting away from the world and letting that gift that God has given us in music can be very powerful. I talked about my wife's love of good, perfect towels, and how that towel needs to be just a little bit rough but soft and fluffy at the same time, and only she knows where that balance is, and how there's just something about thoroughly enjoying the simple things in life and actually taking joy and enjoyment out of stuff that isn't magnanimous. It isn't big stuff. It's just simple stuff. When we have movie popcorn in here, the saltiness of the popcorn, we throw it down. I've heard some of you do it during my sermon. That's what it sounds like up here sometimes. We throw it down because we want our belly, but we don't take time to just savor. How often do we savor our food? How often do we savor the sunrise? How often do we savor our friendships? And savoring life is a big part of serenity. And we talked about staring at the stars and staring at trees and staring in a not weird way at people and people watching. And this week, I was driving back from someplace southeast of here. I don't remember where it was, but I had gum in my mouth that I'd been chewing for too long, and I wanted to throw it out the window. And I'm always really careful about throwing my gum out the window because I don't want it to land where somebody could step in it or even drive over it, because then it could end up anywhere. But there was this embankment next to my car, and I'm driving about 40 miles an hour. There's an embankment about this high. And then past that is just foliage. It's just woods and trees. And I thought, well, I want to throw it in there. But to do so meant I had to so I'm driving, and I had to take my gum and hold it down and throw it up. And I had to throw it at just the right angle and just the right speed. And, of course, it went right over the embankment. And that's a big man moment for me. I'm like, yeah, I nailed it. I don't know why guys get excited about that kind of thing, but I did. But I started thinking about all that went into that action of me cruising down the road at 45 miles an hour, and just the nervous system that God has placed in my body that allowed my system to think about all the muscles and nerves and And somehow the hand-eye coordination connected through the muscles and nerves in my body that fed into my brain that allowed me to throw that at just the right speed and the right angle to make that happen. And even the food that I had to digest from a couple days ago to give my body the energy to do that, and the food system, the digestive system, and the heart rate that kept blood pumping, that fed those nerves and those muscles. And it's just fascinating. Life is fascinating. And serenity, in my opinion, comes somehow with the realization that life is fascinating, that God has created this amazing, beautiful life. And it doesn't take much to really see something exciting. All you got to do is open your eyes and watch. The heavens declare the glory of God, and the sky above proclaim his handiwork. We talked about making your peace with God, and that's the foundation for serenity, that this concept that serenity is the demeanor of the peaceful. Serenity is not something you do. Serenity is not something you necessarily choose, although choosing to be calm is a part of feeding serenity. It's actually an attribute that is fed. There's attributes buried in you that you're at peace already, that you're okay with life where it is, and that serenity comes out of a peaceful heart. And so what we're really wanting to cultivate is a peaceful life. We talked about Jesus and his name as the Prince of Peace, that he is the author of peace. He is the provider of peace. And that if we really want true lasting peace, it comes from the true lasting God that supplies peace. And so what I want to encourage you to do today is to ask the Prince of Peace for a miracle, because what we find in Scripture is that peace and serenity is not really something within our own grasp. We're very frail, we're very fragile, we're kind of incapable of the kind of serenity and peace that the Bible seems to desire for humanity. There's a passage in Colossians where Paul writes, "Let the peace of Christ rule in your hearts, since as members of one body you were called to peace, and be thankful." So we talked last week about how contentment, being satisfied and easily satisfied, is a part of the foundation for peace. But in this passage, I want you to notice, who has the peace? Do you have it, or does it come from somewhere else? What does the first little bit there say? It's the peace of Christ. It's not your peace. And so when we yell, "Serenity now!" that's kind of where we're at when we try to be serene. But this seems to indicate that the peace of Christ is available to us. It's his peace that is given to us. And so what I want to plant in your minds today is that if you need more serenity, if you need more calmness in your life, if you need more clarity and awareness and meditation and silence and solitude and all the things we mentioned last week, some of that is beyond your grasp. Some of it you just can't manufacture, but it can be gifted to you. And the Bible seems to indicate that God desires to gift it to you, that it's something he wants to do in and through you. I actually forgot to put the correct reference on here. You'll see that I've left the same reference, so that's a presentation error there. But the Scriptures teach that you desire and you do not have, so you murder. You covet and you cannot obtain, so you fight and quarrel. You do not have because you do not ask. And when you ask, you do not receive because you ask wrongly to spend it on your passions. And Jesus made it clear that murder isn't just literal murder, but actually when you have hatred in your heart towards another person, that's when you murder. And so when we watch the couple in the clip, the Seinfeld clip, screaming at each other because she won't move her seat up or can't move her seat up, who knows what the truth was there, there's this quarreling and fighting and murder and anger and rage and ferocity towards one another. And this seems to indicate that somehow asking is connected to the solution for all that. So when we talk about butting heads with humanity and being angry with people or arguing all the time, this seems to indicate that there's a way out of that, and it involves asking. And so what I want to encourage you today is what I mentioned earlier, is ask the Prince of Peace for a miracle in your life, is to ask Jesus, give me clarity, give me calmness, give me serenity. And it's something that he desperately wants to give you. It's something he certainly wants to do in your life. Most of you will be familiar with at least a portion of what they call the Serenity Prayer. And in recovery a lot, the Serenity Prayer is a huge part of the recovery process. And it goes like this. It says, "God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference." And so what I want to do is I want to talk about some serenity stoppers today. I want to talk about some of the stuff that holds us back from serenity, and I think it's buried in the serenity prayer. It's like the opposite of what it's asking for is what we tend to have. So for example, in the very beginning it says, grant me the serenity to accept the things that I cannot change. What's buried there is the insinuation is that we want to change what we want to change. And it's a control thing. And so I want to go through this prayer just very briefly and talk about what's implied by it. And the first is that this is not where life is at. It says, give me the serenity to change the thing, or to accept the things that I cannot change. We want to own our lives. It's the human condition. We want to be in control of everything. And I'm sure there's a bunch of gamers in the room. And gamers, they're used to pushing buttons and make their character go where they want their character to go. They push the button and the gun fires. They push the button and the character jumps. They push the joystick and the character moves to the right or moves to the left. And life just isn't that simple. The reality is that in the video game that is your life, there's about 10,000 people that have their hands on that controller. It's not you don't own that controller. There's a lot of other people that are influencing it. The weather influences it. The stock market in China influences it. It's not in your control. And so what we find is that we don't tend to have much peace because we want ownership, and ownership is impossible. You'll never have it. You will never have complete control of your life. And in some sense, the gospel of Jesus is let go of that desire. Is to let go of the desire to own and operate your life and let God take the controls. Because God has his hand on all 10,000 of those people, all 7 billion of those people, the stock market in China and the winds where they blow. And he's in charge and he's in control. And if you'll surrender that joystick to him, that's where serenity and peace comes from. This artist, Andy Yoder, he makes sculptures out of everyday household objects. And so a lot of his sculptures he'll take matches, for example, and he'll form a globe out of them. He'll glue them in piece by piece to where you see a globe with the map of the globe over it. And this is his artist statement. So when he talks about why he does his art, what he wants to do is change how we look at home. Because we look at these normal household objects and they become something else. And he's wanting to influence the way we think about home. And in some sense, he wants to influence the way we think about security. He says home is a place not only of comfort, but control. And this sense of order, in whatever form it takes, acts as a shield against the unpredictability and lurking chaos of the outside world. That's part of why we love our homes, is because our homes is what we control. We're considering buying a home that I mentioned a couple weeks ago with some friends and all coming together. And that's going to require a release of control. And in some sense, serenity comes through a release of control. And in some way, that means a release of home. It means recognizing that there is no place where I am completely in control. Part of serenity is recognizing you don't own the world. And part of serenity is also, and I want to conflict this idea that we can have control and we have a home and we have a safe space with how Jesus talked about his own life and about the lives of his disciples. And he says the Son of Man has no place to lay his head. So somebody comes to Jesus and says, I want to follow you. Jesus says, well, if you want to do that, let me tell you what you're getting into. I got no place to sleep at night. Foxes have holes. Fish have the ocean. The Son of Man, me, Jesus, as a traveling itinerant rabbi, I got no place to sleep. If you're going to follow me, you're losing control. You're losing order. So in some sense, following Jesus is entering a type of disorder, but it's a disorder he's in charge of. Last week when I talked about serenity, somebody came up to me afterwards, which is kind of amusing and actually very practical. He said, how do you find serenity when someone just won't change? And I said, it's a great question, it is, and it's a question we all want answered. But in some sense, following Jesus and recognizing the gospel of Jesus is recognizing that you're nobody's moral police. You get you. You're in charge of you. Now, you can influence, you can persuade, and I don't want to diminish that. But ultimately, your satisfaction, your serenity, your calmness, your clarity, it doesn't come from how much and how powerfully you're able to manipulate other people into being what you want them to be. In fact, that's the exact opposite of the mentality you need to have serenity in your life. And so I want to talk about the most annoying song in the world. Anybody want to take a stab at what song that is? Kung Fu Fighting is one that'll get in your head, that's for sure. Anybody else? What? I have no idea what you're saying. Bird is the word. Why did you even say that? I don't want that in my head. Okay, so I'm going to change my sermon into the second most annoying song in the world, and it's Let It Go from Frozen. Oh! Like, my kids watched Frozen once, and that's all I've allowed. Like, we'll find Kung Fu Panda before we're going to go back to Frozen. And the song is Let It Go, Let It Go. And in a way, that's the entire idea of the gospel of Jesus when it comes to being wronged. Is, man, you just got to let it go. Francis Bacon, who was a European philosopher and author and very famous for supposedly discovering or / determining the scientific method. So basically, the way we do science was determined by this guy, Frank Bacon. And his name is Frank Bacon. So you know he has authority and power. He says this. He says, "This is certain, that a man that studieth revenge keeps his wounds green." And green means nasty, diseased, dying, decaying, necrotic flesh, which otherwise would heal and do well. And I'm not talking about revenge in here, but I am talking about, and two people mentioned this to me after the sermon last week, is that releasing bitterness and releasing unforgiveness that they held towards other people was a huge victory in their ability to feel serenity, in their ability to feel calm. And that's not what the sermon's about today, but I will say this. If you have bitterness towards someone in your heart, if you have unforgiveness, it doesn't mean what they did was okay when you forgive. But what I'm saying is, if you don't have serenity in your life and you have that, I almost guarantee they're related. The chaos inside of you is going to be hard to produce serenity. And I believe bitterness and unforgiveness breeds that kind of chaos. We are having a Catholic demonologist and exorcist come share with us over Halloween this year. I don't know if I've told you guys that yet or not. I'm super excited about it. This dude's name is Adam Bly. He's a bald white dude with pasty white skin. He wears a black suit and black tie, and he looks exactly like you would expect a Catholic exorcist to look like. And the dude is funny, but he does not smile, ever. I think you're going to really enjoy him, and I think we'll be able to get a lot of people there. People are fascinated with the paranormal right now, and have been for a very long time. But I'm reading his book, Hauntings, Possessions, and Exorcisms right now, and it reads like an instruction manual for priests that are performing exorcisms. And it's just like a technical journal. And they put a lot of weight on mental illness and that there's all these other things it could be before they'll determine that something is paranormal. But if a 13-year-old girl is able to pick up a 250-pound man and throw him across the room, then they suspect there's a demon involved. If they speak languages they've never heard, chances are something supernatural is going on here. But in it, he's talking about how people are delivered from demonic activity. And I noticed that he said this specifically about unforgiveness. He said, it's important for the person to repent of their sins and also forgive the sins of others. Demons hold on to both our sins and our unforgiveness of other people's sins. So when he talks about, and some of his stories are just wild stuff. But the first thing he said, sitting down in front of 1,800 people when I saw him speak, he said, don't worry, Jesus is in charge. And that's his mentality, that Jesus is in charge of the demonic realm. But he says that in order for someone to be delivered, it's not just as simple as throwing holy water on them and waving a cross in their face, that there's something that needs to happen foundationally inside someone for demonic activity to leave. And he mentions two things. One is a turning away from what God disapproves of or doesn't prefer for your life, which is sin. He says the other thing is letting go of what other people did to you, or letting go of how you hold on to other people's sins. And so if you want serenity in your life, my opinion is you need to look deeply. You need to look sincerely at what bitterness do I hold? Who do I hate? Who am I angry at? And let God root that stuff out. And that's another miracle God will do that's out of your grasp. You can't do it. You can't love the way Jesus did on your own. But it's something he wants to do in your life. In Ephesians, it tells us to forgive one another as God in Christ forgave us. We are supposed to be people. The people of the cross are people of forgiveness, of letting go. Oh, I just said let it go again. And it was not even in my head. I'm going back to bird as the word. So, at the beginning it says, give me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change. There's a lot of things that are out of your control that you let control you. And so we've got to learn to let go. We've got to learn to let go of controlling our own lives and learn to let go of not allowing other people to influence us. And then secondly, It says, give me the courage to change what I can. What's the opposite of courage? Fear is what I want to talk about. I remember asking this question when I was a little boy and my mom went out for the night and we had babysitters. I remember if she was supposed to be home at 10 and it was 10 after 10, I was just convinced Mom had been in a bad car wreck. I don't know if anybody else did that when they were kids, but when Mom went away, I was afraid. And in a way, all of us have fears that have been inside of us for so long and carried over. And some of them have to do with stuff that actually happened, and some of them have to do with stuff that we imagined could happen. But either way, if you're controlled by fear, if you're controlled by worry, if you're controlled by doubt about the road ahead, it's going to be very challenging to walk in serenity. The famous American novelist and poet Louisa May Alcott said this. She said, "I'm not afraid of storms, for I'm learning how to sail my ship." Serenity comes with the reality that we are going to go through storms, that it's going to happen, that honestly, one day Mom will not come home. Honestly, one day you will not be able to work anymore. We're running through a world that is chaotic and full of storms, and we're learning how to navigate that through it, not avoiding it. And so if you're constantly afraid of what's to come, there's no way you're going to have serenity. But if you have this foundation in you that says no matter what comes, all is well, that's the foundation for serenity. That's where peace comes from. 1 John says, there is no fear in love, for perfect love casts out fear. To cast it out is to kick it out the door. It says it's out. Fear no longer belongs here. And the two commandments of Jesus were that you love God and you love other people. And when your foundation is built on loving God and loving other people, fear is cast out the door. It also mentions, so it says the courage to change what I can. And buried in that is the implication that you have to do something. And so we can't just say, God, give me the courage to change what I can, and then do nothing. So I want to talk just very briefly about the devil's magic button. And I'm going to call the snooze alarm on your clock the devil's magic button for just the next couple minutes. What I mean is laziness breeds chaos. If you get discouraged or fearful or wrapped up in bitterness or whatever it is that controls you, and in doing so refuse to take action and won't do something to change the circumstances of your life, the circumstances of your life are always going to own you in a certain sense. But God has created us as beings that can step up and challenge the system and challenge what controls our lives and challenge what owns us and challenge what makes us afraid. And sometimes we want to tell people, oh, it's okay, you just calm down and everything, just relax and just go take a breather. And in some way that's not bad advice, but if we don't follow that with do something, I don't think we're getting all the way there towards what it means to have serenity in your life. If your house is a mess constantly because you just won't clean it, chaos. If your relationships are a mess because you just won't deal with the gossip that's in your life, chaos. And so if you don't go into action, you're always going to have chaos. And a life filled with chaos is a life that's difficult to be calm about. So it requires doing something. It requires actually getting off your butt and making a move. The old proverb says this, the soul of the sluggard, and sluggard is one of the best words in the entire Bible. Like if I want to insult somebody, I need to always keep that in my back pocket, you sluggard. The soul of the sluggard craves and gets nothing. So a sluggard is one who is like a slug. They just kind of weasel their way through life and barely move. But the soul of the diligent is richly supplied. And what you'll notice here is that it says action affects spirituality. It says the sluggard's soul wants and doesn't get. And it says the diligent person's soul is richly supplied. It's not even talking about money. It's not talking about a roof over your head. It's not talking about any of that stuff. It's talking about your soul. It says laziness grips your soul and brings it down, whereas action will build you up. So when we talk about the courage to change what we can, we're talking about not being fearful and not being lazy. And then finally this. So it says the wisdom to know the difference. What is the opposite of wisdom? Foolishness. That's right. Like this hat. I just saw this and thought, that sums, I don't know why it just looks foolish to me. The smile is also kind of goofy. The hat and the smile work well together, in my opinion. The proverb says, when a man's folly brings his way to ruin, his heart rages against the Lord. Something happens when you are stupid and do stupid things and bad consequences come. Something happens to your soul, is what this seems to imply. And so when it comes to, it says, give me the courage to change what I can and the wisdom to know the difference. Partly what we're looking for is just knowledge from God on how to live this very challenging life. When we ask for a miracle from the Prince of Peace that will promote serenity in our lives, we're asking in some sense for wisdom, that we'll be able to make right decisions, because right decisions dissipate chaos, and chaos is in some sense what controls our lack of serenity. And so we're asking God to help us think. And there's a specific passage in the Bible that talks about wanting wisdom. And when you ask God for wisdom, he gives you in rich supply without showing favoritism to anyone. So you might think, yeah, the preacher can ask for wisdom, or the priest can ask for wisdom, or that really spiritual person can ask for wisdom, but I never could. And the Bible seems to indicate you're just wrong about that. If you really want to know the right way to live life, ask. Ask God and he will show you. So I want to read the Serenity Prayer to you again, but I want to read it in its entirety. So what you're used to is, God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference. This is the part that you see on plaques all over America, right? But the Serenity Prayer goes on in portions that most of you have never seen. It says, living one day at a time. And we could dissect each of these. Living one day at a time is an incredible way to live your life. It's living in the now and not worrying about the future. Enjoying one moment at a time, feeling the fabric in the towel. Accepting hardships is the pathway to peace. If you think you're going to achieve peace because everything is just going to be perfect, you just have a wrong idea about what peace means. Peace is having peace through the circumstances, not by circumventing the circumstances. I didn't mean to tear this wholly down. Taking as he did, being Jesus, this sinful world as it is, not as I would have it. This is one of the most fascinating things in the entire concept of the Bible, in my opinion, is that God let people be people. He could have made automatons that he controls and made little robots so that the Garden of Eden would always be the Garden of Eden. But even God said, I am not going to control everyone, and turned it over to us to make something out of this world. And it's amazing that God would do that, and then we think we can control people. It's anti-God to try to own people. That's just not how he operates. Persuade, yes. Love, adore, and use that as a method to draw people in, yes. Tell people when they're making foolish mistakes, yes. But to get all bent out, I think God's in a good mood. I don't think God gets bent out of shape and angry and gripped with people. And he certainly doesn't step in and just own people and make them do what he wants them to do. And sometimes that's what we want to do in people's lives, is make them do what we want them to do. Okay, I'm gonna fly through the rest of this. Trusting that he will make all things right, and he will, if I surrender to his will, that I may be reasonably happy in this life and supremely happy with him forever in the next. So the Westminster Catechism has this passage in it about what is the chief duty of man. And I've mentioned it in here many, many times. Can anybody tell me, otherwise I'm going to know that I'm an absolute failure as a preacher. Can anybody tell me what the Westminster Catechism says is the chief duty of man? Okay, memorize this. Say it to yourself. It's to glorify God and to delight in him forever. That's what you were designed to do. And that's what this says here at the end, is if I surrender to his will, I will be reasonably happy in this life. And you notice reasonably happy in this life. Happiness isn't the goal. Happiness doesn't equate to serenity. They're not the same thing. If we think that happiness will come to serenity, we're just wrong. Serenity is something outside of happiness. It says, I will be reasonably happy in this life because I have serenity, because I have peace. And it says, I will be supremely happy with him forever in the next life. It's that serenity doesn't come from the circumstances now and how all that works out. It comes from this foundation of peace with the Prince of Peace that is an eternal and lasting kind of peace that is unshakable.